The worn linoleum floor of the diner seemed to reflect Sarah's own exhaustion, each scuff mark a testament to another day endured under the suffocating reign of her boss. She moved with a practiced weariness, her smile a fragile mask that barely concealed the slow crumbling of her spirit. But today, something felt different, a subtle shift in the stale air, as an unassuming figure slipped into a corner booth, an observer whose quiet presence held an unspoken promise, or perhaps a threat, to the grim predictability of her routine. How could this ordinary, soul-crushing Tuesday possibly morph into the day that redefined her entire existence, all because of a stranger nursing a simple cup of coffee? Sarah had always dreamt of something more, a life where her quiet creativity could find an outlet, perhaps a small art studio or a chance to illustrate children's books. But reality was a cramped apartment and overdue bills, a stark contrast to the vibrant worlds she sketched in her mind. She poured her remaining energy into her job at Thompson's Diner, treating every customer with a genuine warmth that her boss, Mr. Thompson himself, seemed incapable of recognizing, let alone appreciating. Her dedication was often met not with acknowledgement, but with a fresh wave of criticism, a constant reminder of her precarious position and the ease with which her meager income could vanish. Mr. Thompson was a man who seemed to derive a perverse pleasure from wielding his petty power, his voice a grating instrument of daily discontent. He'd find fault in the perfectly polished silverware, the precise angle of a napkin, or the speed at which an order was delivered, his criticisms always sharpest when directed at Sarah. It was as if her quiet resilience was a personal affront to him. Today, it was a slightly overbrewed pot of coffee, a minor oversight in a busy morning, that became the catalyst for his latest tirade, his voice echoing through the diner, making Sarah shrink under the weight of unwanted attention, her cheeks burning with shame. The constant barrage of negativity had chipped away at Sarah's confidence, leaving her feeling small and insignificant. She walked on eggshells, her anxiety a constant companion, the fear of unemployment a looming shadow that dictated her every move. The diner, once just a job, had become a psychological prison, each shift a sentence to be served. She often found herself staring out the window, imagining a different life, one where her worth wasn't measured by the flawlessness of her service or the thickness of her skin. But such dreams felt like distant stars, beautiful but unreachable from her current vantage point. The incident over the coffee unfolded with painful slowness. Thompson's voice, laced with disdain, cut through the morning chatter, ensuring every patron was aware of Sarah's supposed incompetence. "Can't even make a decent pot of coffee, can we, Sarah?" he sneered, his words designed to sting. Sarah mumbled an apology, her eyes fixed on the floor, wishing it would swallow her whole. A few customers exchanged uncomfortable glances, a silent sympathy that offered little solace. Most, however, simply focused on their meals, accustomed to Thompson's outbursts and unwilling to become his next target. It was into this charged atmosphere that a man entered, so unobtrusively that he almost blended into the worn wallpaper. He wore a simple jacket and a baseball cap pulled low, his demeanor quiet and unassuming. He found a booth in the far corner, away from the main thoroughfare of the diner, and asked for a menu with a polite nod. He didn't seem to be looking for attention, just a quiet place for a meal. This man, who observed the unfolding drama with a steady, unreadable gaze, was Keanu Reeves, though no one in Thompson's Diner, least of all Sarah, had yet recognized him. Keanu settled into his booth, ordering a black coffee and a side of toast, his eyes scanning the room with a subtle attentiveness. It didn't take long for the undercurrent of tension to become apparent. He noticed the way Sarah flinched almost imperceptibly whenever Mr. Thompson's voice boomed across the diner, the way her shoulders drooped when she thought no one was looking. He wasn't actively prying, but the dynamics of the small establishment were laid bare for anyone willing to see, and Keanu was a keen observer of human nature, often finding stories in the quiet interactions of everyday life that others might miss. Another incident soon followed. A family at a nearby table had a complicated order, and Sarah, triple-checking everything, took a moment longer than Thompson deemed acceptable. "Are we planning to serve these people today, or are you just going to stand there admiring the menu?" Thompson barked from behind the counter, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Keanu saw Sarah's jaw tighten, her polite smile faltering for just a second before she quickly apologized to the family and hurried to place their order. The injustice was palpable, a small, daily cruelty playing out in plain sight. Keanu's expression remained largely neutral, but a slight furrow in his brow, a momentary narrowing of his eyes, betrayed his internal reaction. He wasn't one for dramatic displays, but the scene resonated with a deep-seated sense of fairness within him. He took a slow sip of his coffee, his gaze thoughtful as he watched Sarah navigate the minefield of her workplace. He recognized the quiet strength it took to endure such treatment day in and day out, and the toll it clearly exacted on her spirit. He saw more than just a waitress. He saw a person struggling under an unfair burden. When Sarah brought Keanu his simple order, she managed a professional smile, but her eyes held a lingering sadness, a weariness that even her best efforts couldn't entirely mask. "Here's your coffee and toast, sir. Anything else I can get for you?" she asked, her voice soft. Keanu met her gaze with a gentle, almost imperceptible nod. "This is perfect, thank you," he replied, his tone kind, a small island of civility in the otherwise hostile environment. For a fleeting moment, Sarah felt a flicker of something other than anxiety, a brief, unexpected warmth from a stranger's considerate demeanor. As if on cue, Mr. Thompson bustled past Keanu's table, muttering loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "Honestly, you just can't find good help these days. Everyone wants a paycheck, but no one wants to actually work for it." He didn't even glance at Keanu, too wrapped up in his own self-importance and his campaign of casual denigration against his staff. The comment hung in the air, a blanket statement of disdain that further poisoned the atmosphere. Keanu remained silent, but the air around his table seemed to grow stiller, heavier with unspoken thoughts. The tension in the diner was now a palpable entity, a silent hum of discomfort and simmering resentment. Sarah continued her duties, her movements precise but tinged with an almost robotic quality, a defense mechanism against the constant emotional assault. Keanu finished his toast slowly, his presence a quiet counterpoint to Thompson's blustering. The other patrons, sensing an unspoken shift, cast furtive glances between the disgruntled boss, the beleaguered waitress, and the silent man in the corner. It felt like the calm before a storm, though no one could predict its nature or its trigger. Then came the moment that shattered Sarah's remaining composure. A young child, excited and clumsy, accidentally knocked a glass of water off his table, the liquid splashing onto the floor near where Sarah was clearing another table. Before Sarah could even react, Thompson was upon her, his face contorted in fury. "Look at this mess. Are you blind as well as incompetent, Sarah? This is coming out of your wages," he roared, his accusation vicious and utterly baseless. He didn't care about the child's accident. He only saw another opportunity to demean her publicly, to assert his dominance. Sarah stood frozen, the unfairness of the accusation hitting her like a physical blow. Tears welled in her eyes, threatening to spill over. This was too much. The constant belittling, the endless fault-finding, and now this public, unwarranted humiliation over something she hadn't even done. She felt utterly exposed, stripped of her dignity, with all eyes in the diner fixed on her. It was her lowest point, a moment where the thought of simply walking out, consequences be damned, felt overwhelmingly tempting, yet terrifyingly impossible. Her spirit felt like a fragile thing, about to shatter. From his corner booth, Keanu witnessed the entire exchange. As Sarah fought back tears, her shoulders trembling, he met her gaze across the room. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a profound, quiet understanding, a silent offering of support that seemed to bridge the distance between them. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but for Sarah it was a lifeline, in a sea of indifference and cruelty. For a split second, she didn't feel quite so alone, as if someone, at least, saw the injustice for what it was. Then, Keanu calmly placed his napkin on the table and slowly rose from his seat. He didn't raise. His voice didn't make a scene, but his movement drew all eyes. He walked towards the counter where Mr. Thompson was still fuming. "Excuse me," Keanu said, his voice even and steady, yet carrying an undeniable weight that cut through Thompson's tirade. "I believe there might be a misunderstanding about what just happened with that spilled water." The simple, direct address was unexpected, and the diner fell into an almost complete silence, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Mr. Thompson, initially startled by the interruption, turned to Keanu, his face still flushed with anger. "And who are you to tell me about my business?" he snapped, clearly unaccustomed to being challenged, especially by a customer. He gave Keanu a dismissive once-over, failing to recognize the quietly famous face beneath the brim of the cap. He saw only an interruption, another annoyance in his self-important day. "This is between me and my, staff," he added, stumbling slightly as if suddenly unsure of his footing. Keanu didn't flinch at Thompson's aggressive tone. He simply stood his ground, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the manager's bluster. "I was watching," Keanu stated plainly, his voice retaining its quiet authority. "The young boy at that table accidentally knocked over the glass. Your waitress had nothing to do with it. In fact, she was about to help clean it up before you started yelling." He wasn't accusing. He was merely stating a fact, but the implication of Thompson's unfairness hung heavily in the air, a silent judgment that resonated with everyone present. Keanu then shifted his gaze slightly, not just addressing Thompson but the quiet onlookers as well, his voice carrying a gentle yet firm conviction. "It seems to me that a little kindness and understanding go a long way in any environment, especially one where people are working hard to serve others." He wasn't preachy, nor was he aggressive, but his words carried the weight of simple, undeniable truth. He spoke of the value of respect, the importance of treating employees with dignity, not as objects for venting frustration, but as human beings contributing to the success of a business. Thompson, caught off guard by the calm, rational intervention and the sudden focused attention of his other patrons, began to stammer. "Well, I run a tight ship here. Standards have to be maintained," he blustered, trying to regain control, but his usual arrogance was noticeably deflated. The steady, unwavering gaze of the stranger was unnerving, and the silent agreement from the other customers made him feel a prickle of unease. He sensed he was losing the narrative, his authority slowly eroding under the quiet pressure of reason. The other customers, emboldened by Keanu's stand, began to murmur their agreement. An elderly woman nodded emphatically, and a man at a nearby table quietly said, "He's right, you know. She's always very polite." This subtle shift in the diner's atmosphere was significant. Sarah, who had been bracing for further verbal assault, watched in stunned silence, a fragile tendril of hope unfurling within her. Someone was not just seeing her plight, but actively speaking out against the injustice she had endured for so long. It was a moment she never thought would come. Keanu then added, almost reflectively, "You know, sometimes the people who seem the quietest, the ones just trying to do their job, are the ones with the most to offer. If only someone took the time to see it." He wasn't just talking about Sarah as a waitress, but as a person with untapped potential, a sentiment that resonated deeply. His words weren't just a defense of Sarah in that moment, but a broader commentary on human value and a subtle challenge to Thompson's entire managerial philosophy. Sarah stood by, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within her, shock, gratitude, and a dawning sense of disbelief. This stranger, who moments ago was just another customer, was now her unlikely champion, articulating thoughts she had barely dared to whisper to herself. The fear that had been her constant companion began to recede, replaced by a tentative courage. She looked at Keanu, truly seeing him for the first time, not as a customer, but as a person of profound, quiet strength and unexpected empathy. Thompson, now visibly flustered, and perhaps finally recognizing the quiet charisma of the man before him, or at least the shifting tide of public opinion in his own diner, struggled for words. His bluster had completely evaporated, leaving behind a sheepish uncertainty. He looked from Keanu to Sarah, then around at the watching eyes of his customers, a dawning realization that he had profoundly misjudged not just the situation, but potentially the quiet man who had called him out. His face, usually red with anger, was now pale. As the tension in the diner began to subtly shift, Keanu's gaze softened as he turned slightly towards Sarah. He noticed a small, intricate doodle on the corner of her order pad, a beautifully detailed feather. "That's a lovely drawing," he commented, his voice gentle, a complete departure from the confrontational energy of moments before. "Do you enjoy art?" The question was unexpected, personal, and it cut through the remaining awkwardness, opening a new, unforeseen path in the conversation and, unbeknownst to Sarah, in her life. Sarah, startled by the direct and kind inquiry, blushed slightly. "Oh, yes, I like to sketch a little. It's just a hobby," she stammered, unused to anyone taking an interest in her passions, especially in this environment. She instinctively tried to cover the doodle, but Keanu's genuine smile was disarming. For the first time in what felt like ages, she spoke of something she loved, a small flicker of her true self emerging from beneath the weight of her daily struggles. She hesitantly mentioned her quiet dream of one day illustrating, if only things were different. Keanu listened intently, his head tilted slightly, a look of sincere interest on his face. "A hobby like that, a talent, shouldn't just stay hidden on order pads," he said thoughtfully. Then a flicker of an idea seemed to cross his features. "You know," he began, a new warmth in his tone, I have a friend who runs a small independent publishing house. They're always looking for fresh artistic talent, particularly for children's books. Your style, from what little I can see, has a real charm to it, a gentleness that would be perfect." He then reached into his wallet, not for money to pay his bill, but for a business card. "This is my friend's contact," he said, handing it to Sarah. "And this," he added, taking out a pen and scribbling a personal email address on the back of it, "is mine. Send me some of your sketches. I'd be happy to make a personal introduction. No promises, of course, but good people who are passionate about their art deserve a chance to be seen." The offer was so direct, so tangible, it felt like a dream. Sarah stared at the card in her hand, then at Keanu, her eyes wide with disbelief and brimming with fresh tears. But this time they were tears of overwhelming gratitude and an almost painful hope. I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. This is more than I could ever imagine." The simple act of kindness, the belief shown by this stranger, felt like a monumental gift, a key unlocking a door she thought would forever remain closed. Mr. Thompson stood by, utterly speechless, a bystander in his own establishment. The power dynamic had completely inverted. He had gone from being the tyrannical boss to a witness of an extraordinary act of generosity and connection, all sparked by his own cruelty. The man he had dismissed as an interfering customer was now, very clearly, someone of consequence, not just in fame, but in character. The weight of his earlier behavior settled heavily upon him, the smallness of his actions magnified by the largeness of Keanu's gesture. With a final, encouraging nod to Sarah and a polite, almost dismissive glance towards Thompson, Keanu retrieved his cap and jacket. He placed enough money on the table to cover his bill and a very generous tip for Sarah, then quietly made his way to the exit. He didn't seek applause or further acknowledgement. His intervention had been about correcting an injustice and offering an opportunity, not about self-aggrandizement. As he stepped out into the bustling street, he was once again just another person in the crowd, leaving behind a diner forever changed by his brief presence. In the days that followed, Sarah felt as though she were walking on air, armed with the contact Keanu had given her and a renewed sense of purpose. She meticulously gathered her best sketches, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. She sent the email, pouring her gratitude and her aspirations into her words. The reply came sooner than she expected, an invitation to meet, to discuss her portfolio. The door Keanu had nudged open was now swinging wide, inviting her into a future she had only dared to dream about. It wasn't long before Sarah's delicate, heartfelt illustrations began to find their audience. Her first commissioned project, a series of drawings for a children's book, was met with acclaim. She was able to leave Thompson's diner, trading her worn-out apron for sketchbooks and colored pencils. Her small apartment, once a symbol of aim, her struggles slowly transformed into a cozy studio, filled with light and the vibrant colors of her imagination. She found joy not just in her art, but in the quiet confidence that blossomed from pursuing her true passion. As for Mr. Thompson, word of the incident at the diner, and the quiet celebrity who had witnessed his behavior, began to spread through the small community. Patrons, once tolerant of his gruffness, now saw it through a different lens. Business at Thompson's diner started to dwindle, his tables often more empty than full. The universe, it seemed, had a way of rebalancing the scales. His cruelty, once a source of twisted satisfaction, now echoed in the emptiness of his establishment, a quiet but potent form of poetic justice. Sarah often thought back to that fateful day, the day a stranger had not only defended her, but had seen something in her that even she had begun to doubt. Keanu Reeves, the famous actor, had acted not as a celebrity, but as a compassionate human being, his empathy a quiet force that had redirected the course of her life. His intervention was a reminder that kindness could be found in the most unexpected places, and that one person's belief could indeed ignite a dormant dream and turn it into a vibrant reality. The lasting impact of that encounter wasn't just Sarah's newfound career. It was the restoration of her faith in humanity and in herself. It was a testament to the profound power of standing up for someone, of offering a hand not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. Keanu's actions that day in the diner became a quiet legend for Sarah, a personal story of how a moment of injustice, met with courage and compassion, could blossom into an extraordinary new beginning, proving that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just order coffee and see the best in people. Sarah's incredible journey from a place of daily humiliation to one of joyful creation is a powerful reminder that true change often begins with a single act of courage and compassion. The unexpected intervention by Keanu Reeves didn't just stop an injustice, it unlocked a future. What did you think of Keanu's actions? Have you ever seen a moment of kindness dramatically alter someone's path? Share your own inspiring stories and thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more tales of hope and transformation, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update.